Hello, Merry Christmas, and welcome to another macro photography tutorial. Whether you're a macro photographer or any other kind of photographer, Bokeh can play a massive part in making your images look really cool, interesting, and creative. So today I've got 5 tips for better Bokeh. Hi guys, I'm Ben from Adapt2Looks, and today we're taking a look at how to get better Bokeh. We're going to be giving you 5 tips on how to improve your Bokeh and really take control of those effects that happen in the background of your images. If you don't know what Bokeh is, that is pretty much the explanation. It's those effects that happen on the pinpoints of light that are out of focus in the background of your images. You'll see them a lot in macro photography as well as portraiture. Wedding photographers alike to go after nice Bokeh in the background of their images as well. So today we're going to be experimenting with a few different techniques to improve that effect. Let's start with tip number 1. My first tip is actually a bit of a subjective one. It's more to do with when you use your Bokeh and how. So if you're using your Bokeh pretty sparingly in the background of your images, then great, it's really going to make a difference to your image. However, if you're going out specifically to find Bokeh and capture it, then you might want to think about what else you're going to put in your image. Taking a picture of a nice out of focus Bokeh, like for instance the Christmas tree lights in the background here, that's all well and good and you'll probably create some really interesting abstract shots. However, putting a subject in your image in focus, nice and sharp and closer to the camera, that is going to create a nice contrast between the sharp subject and then the Bokeh in the background. So if you're going out with Bokeh in mind, have something else in mind as well. I've got a couple of little things to shoot here, so that's going to take us on to tip number 2. Tip number 2 is all about the distance between your camera, your subject, and your lights. The 2 distances there are going to make a big difference to your Bokeh, particularly the distance between your subject and your lights. The larger that distance is, the larger your Bokeh is going to be because your lights are going to be more out of focus in the background. I'm going to give you a quick demonstration using this little deer man ornament which I have lying around. I'm going to be lighting him up and giving you a bit of a contrast between him being close to the Christmas tree and further away. Firstly, I'm going to come nice and close to the Christmas tree and get a shot with not too much distance between my subject and these lights. I do need to light my subject though. For that, I'm just going to be using a single white lighting arm plugged into the Adapt2Looks Studio, and then a not orange colour filter on the end of that lighting arm to give us a nice warm effect and balance the light between our subject and these quite warm lights in the background. I'm just going to place that so it's lighting up one half of his face. So as you can see, we're actually getting some quite nice Bokeh in the background of this shot. Now, if I were to take him back over to my dining table, which is much further away from these lights, we're going to get a very different effect. So now that we've got more distance between our subject and our Christmas tree, we've got a lot more Bokeh. Not least because there's more lights in the frame because they're further back, but also because they're further out of focus, and that means that those Bokeh lights, the effects are going to be much larger. It's also going to make a difference how close you are to your subject. The closer you get to your subject and the further away your lights are, the more Bokeh you're going to get. If you move further back from your subject and comparatively there's less distance between the subject and the lights, then you're going to get smaller Bokeh. This is a really easy way to control how big those Bokeh effects are, while also balancing how close you are to your subject. Tip number 3. What happens if you want to get nice and close to your subject and don't have the luxury of changing the distance between the subject and the lights? Say, for example, taking some macro shots of the baubles on your tree. Well, there is a way that we can still control our Bokeh, and that's using our aperture. As most people know, aperture changes the amount of light that enters your camera and therefore the brightness of your image. There's one other thing that affects though, and that's your depth of field. So having a shallow depth of field will improve your Bokeh. So let's take a look at our settings and how we can manipulate them to make better bokeh. You can see here that we're getting pretty decent bokeh in the background of this shot, despite shooting at f10. Now, if I adjust these settings a little bit, we can make that much better. The first thing I'm going to do is change my aperture. So I'm going to take that right down to its minimum, which at the moment is f3.5 on this lens. To compensate for our brightness, I'm going to take my ISO down to about 400. That should give us a fairly similar exposure to what we were working with just a moment ago. And if I open this up again and focus back on my bauble, you'll see that we both have a much shallower depth of field, but that bokeh in the background is much, much larger. So manipulating your settings, particularly your aperture, can give you a lot of control over your bokeh. Definitely play around with that as you're setting your camera up to find out what the best settings are for your particular situation. Tip number 4. Did you know that bokeh doesn't have to be in the background? Anything that is out of focus will create a little bit of bokeh. So that can also mean the foreground. Now, it takes a little bit more thought and a little bit more composition to achieve this, but we can do it. I'm going to take a look at a couple of the baubles on my tree and see if I can't get some bokeh in the foreground of my images as well as the background. So what I want to do is take a look at these two baubles just here. We've got a sort of a rose gold pinkish one and a gold one with lots of fairy lights and various little bits of green intertwined here. So it's going to be an interesting shot, and I think we'll be able to get some foreground bokeh. I might need a little bit of help with it though. I've mounted my control pod on the top of my camera, and I've got a lighting arm at the ready, so I can just shine this into the tree where I need it, just in the foreground of my image, so that some of the sparkles on this this gold one, it's going to create a little bit of bokeh for us. Let's take a look, see if we can't see that for ourselves. So as I focus in on my image here, you can see that on the gold bauble we're actually already getting some bokeh. As I focus in and out, you'll see that that bokeh changes, and depending on where I put my adapter looks like, you'll see that that's shining in different places as well. You can see that we've still got some background bokeh going on at the same time with those lights over there. In fact, if I go and focus on those lights, you'll see the fairy lights in the foreground go out of focus as well. Now, in situations like this, you really need to keep an eye out for interesting things in the foreground as well as in the background. It's all well and good just looking for your bokeh in the background of your images, but if you ignore the foreground, you might be missing out on some really cool shots. I think I've saved the best tip till last. Tip number 5 is all about changing the shape of your bokeh. So far we've used our focus and our depth of field to change how large our bokeh is, how numerous those little artifacts are, and how bright they are, but we can actually change the shape to pretty much anything that we want using some pretty simple crafty materials. Just by cutting out some shapes from some black craft paper, we can create a filter for the end of our lens that will change the shape of your bokeh to pretty much anything that you'd like, hearts or stars or whatever shape you can cut out. I'm going to be doing exactly that in my next video, which is going to be out in a couple of days' time on Christmas Day. And the reason for that is so that you guys can follow along with it and maybe get the kids involved as well, grandkids maybe. It's really fun to do and teach the kids about photography, get them doing some crafty stuff and get them creating their own bokeh. So I hope some of you will follow along with that when it comes out. Make sure to subscribe for that video, otherwise you might miss it. And if you've enjoyed this video, let me know down in the comments. Wish each other a Merry Christmas. Give the video a like if you enjoyed it. You can consider that a Christmas gift to me if you'd like. For now though guys, happy holidays, very Merry Christmas, and thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.